Hello YouTube, Internet, world. Welcome back to what I like to call Dime Store Cinema, the show in which I watch movies, I give you my 2 cents, so you can decide if it's worth your dime. Let's talk movies. Today I'd like to discuss Blade Runner 2049, and since this is still in theaters, I will refrain from spoilers. First off, I would like to say that the director, Denis Villeneuve, is an up-and-coming talent whom I think has already proven himself as being a brilliant director. If for no other reason than the fact that he directed Arrival, which is one of my favorite films in the last decade. On top of that, he also directed Prisoners and also Sicario and many others. He is a brilliant filmmaker. He is a visionary. He is one of the better visual storytellers that are out there. But what separates him from someone like Refn is that he also is interested in a good script. He's also interested in interesting and compelling characters. I think that's what sets him apart and makes him a better filmmaker in total. So, because of that, that was really what started my excitement for this film, because I heard that they were planning on making a remake a while back, and I wasn't excited. But then I saw that they got Harrison Ford back, and that was, a little exciting. Then I saw they got Ryan Gosling. I really like Ryan Gosling. I think he's a fine actor. That brought it up a little bit more. And then I saw who they got to direct it. And then I was very excited because of his previous work. And then I saw who the cinematographer was. And then I was even more excited because the man is a genius. So all of those things, all of the talent that came together to make this film made me very excited for it. I didn't really see them straying away from the universe that was created by the original Blade Runner. And I was right, they didn't. In fact, they did a really good job of progressing the universe, which I thought was great. They took the elements of the original that made that universe so interesting, and they aged it a little bit. And they did a very good job at doing that. And so I would say that one of the biggest strengths of the film is the visuals. That's not to downplay anything else. There are a lot of very positive things about this movie, but it was absolutely beautiful to watch, which actually kind of leads into, there are only 2 negatives that I have for this entire movie. And this is a long movie, so only having 2 negatives is a praise. Which actually leads into my biggest gripe with the movie, is that it is, in fact, too long. And when I say it's too long, I don't want you to think that I mean that it's boring. It's not boring. It's so beautiful that it keeps you from being bored, or at least it kept me from being bored. I enjoyed seeing everything so much that I never found myself bored. The reason I say that it's too long, and it was very obvious to my wife as well, is that it seemed overly self-indulgent. There were a lot of scenes that were unnecessary for the story, unnecessary for the characters, and that is a problem. And I think that's what separates it from, say, the original, because in the original one, the original Blade Runner is also a long movie, but every scene in that movie is part of character development and the story. That cannot be said about this movie. There are scenes that drag on too long to actually effectively tell the story. It slows it down. There are entire scenes that are completely unnecessary for telling the story. They're just inserted into it because I think because they're interesting concepts. I don't want to come across as making it sound like these scenes were unenjoyable. They were just unnecessary for the film. They were unnecessary for the character development. And I won't go into details because, I think it's important for the viewer to be able to experience them for themselves. But I think that it's, as a person who is critiquing the medium of filmmaking itself, I think it's important to make these distinctions, and one of which being that if you have a scene that serves no purpose, you really shouldn't include that in your final cut of the film. It's like in writing. If you're writing a paragraph that has nothing to do with the story and it's just an interesting concept, you need to cut that out, because it's just sloppy writing at that point. It's just a self-indulgent paragraph. And that's kind of how some of the scenes in this felt. It felt like Villeneuve was given a little bit too much creative freedom and he ran with it. And and I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe in the script there were purposes, or maybe in the editing they changed the order of the scenes to where they didn't fit quite right. Or maybe scenes were cut because the movie was already so long that would have made those scenes more important or more necessary for the story or character development. But as it is, as a theatrical release, there are in fact scenes that do nothing to push the story forward, do nothing to actually develop the characters like I think they were intended to. So that's the big problem that I had with the film. However, like I said, it wasn't a boring film despite that. It was just a noticeable consequence of some of the editing and some of the direction. My other problem with the movie, my only other problem, is with the ending. I don't think that the ending was as strong of a punch as they were intending. There were a lot of things left open-ended, and I think what separates this from the original is that although there were a lot of things left open-ended in the original, the core story had enough subtext in the ending that it didn't leave you unfulfilled. Whereas this one, I think, felt a little empty. And maybe that was just me, but to me it seemed like it was just a little empty in the delivery, but not enough so for me to say that I didn't enjoy it. Once again, I love this movie. And then cut right to the chase, I think everyone should go see this movie to support it, to give money towards a quality film, to give money towards a film director and actors who are interested in doing something interesting and beautiful, as opposed to so much of what comes out today, which is just a status quo and is mindless garbage. Which, once again, I've said this before, mindless films are fun sometimes, and sometimes we need those to just relax and enjoy ourselves and escape reality. This movie allows you to escape reality, but it creates a whole new reality, or it extends a whole new reality that's already created in the original. And it just envelops you in this very flushed out world. And much like in the first one, it's a very good representation of a future society. And what really separates a good representation of a future society from a bad one is when you actually take elements from the past. Because every society that has ever existed takes from the past and puts its own spin on it. It puts its own philosophy on an ancient representation. So maybe not even ancient, but just previous. And so I really like that they took from Asian culture, but in this movie, they aged a lot of the Asian elements down or up a little bit. And then with the new replicant creator, they introduced almost an Egyptian feel to his corporation, which I thought was very interesting, considering some of the philosophy that's present in the film. It might have been a little bit too on the nose, but I still thought that it was very interesting. If you know anything about Egyptian myth, there were some elements that kind of tied in with the ideas that were being presented in this film. And once again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it deals with the concept of having a soul. Whereas in the original, it dealt more with just life itself and being self-aware. This one deals more with the idea of a soul and what is a soul and what it would mean for an artificial life to be birthed, and if that would affect its place in the world. So it was dealing once again with pretty heady topics. And I thought it did a pretty good job with it. I think, though, that the original movie, I think the writing for the original was a little better. But I would say that this one is a better movie in general, as far as editing and presentation and other things like that. And some of that might have to do with technology. But I think it also has to do with direction and cinematography and things like that. So I think both, you could have the argument, one or the other, which one is better. And I think there are positives. There could be the argument on either case. So I think that the first one, I think Blade Runner is better in some ways, and I think that Blade Runner 2049 is better in some ways. So I think the argument is there to which one is a better film. I tend to be more of a classic person, a person who enjoys classics, a classicist, if you will. So I would usually tend towards the original. And in this case, I think I might, just because, like I said, I think the writing is a little better, and I think the editing is a little better, and the pacing's a little better. But once again, I think the argument could be made either way. One major argument I think that could be made for this movie is Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford gave one of his best performances in this movie. And this is something my sister and I discussed, and also my wife and I discussed, how it was really nice to see Harrison Ford actually act. So much of what Harrison Ford is cast in, he's just called upon to be a charming rogue, if you will. In this movie, he actually had to act. He had to really harness pain and surprise and internal turmoil, and he did a really, really good job at it. I was very impressed with his acting chops in this movie, his ability to emote and his ability to express so much with his eyes and his facial expressions. I will say he does get knocked unconscious an awful lot in this movie, which is a movie trope that really bothers me. People getting knocked out. I mean, for one, when you get knocked out, you're getting brain damage. So all these people who just get knocked out all the time, there's a reason why most boxers, by the time they retire, can barely speak. It's because they get knocked out. And so it bothers me when I see people get knocked out as much as they do in these movies, particularly since they're still perfectly functioning people. But, then again, maybe it's just that one point in time that they got knocked out a few times in a row. And so there's not permanent damage. I don't know. But it always kind of bothers me, just how people just get knocked out. Just filmmakers, just have them be so incapacitated with pain that they can be drug off somewhere. Don't just make them go to sleep. That's boring. Let your actors act. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that was a negative, since I'm griping about it. But once again, it happens so often in movies. A lot of times it can go unnoticed. But whatever. But yeah, no. Once again, I absolutely suggest this movie. It's definitely worth your money. Particularly, I mean, you're definitely getting a bargain considering how long the movie is. So if you have 2.5 hours to 2 hours and 45 minutes to spare, definitely go see it. Once again, like I said, support good filmmaking. Show Hollywood that you're interested in good and thought-provoking cinema. Show them that you're interested in more than just the mind-numbing trash that is so prevalent. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing, and I'll talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.